The morning sun was already beating down hard on the streets of Birmingham when Danny pulled his leather jacket over his shoulders. The smell of motor oil and cigarettes clung to the fabric like a second skin. He had been working late again at the garage, trying to save every penny he could. His girlfriend was 6 months pregnant and the bills were piling up faster than he could count them. Danny wasn't your typical biker. Sure, he rode with the Iron Wolves, and sure, he looked the part with his scruffy beard and worn leather boots. But deep down, he was just a 28-year-old guy trying to make ends meet. He fixed motorcycles for a living, and he was good at it. Real good. His hands could bring any dead engine back to life, and that skill had earned him respect in the club. The Iron Wolves weren't like the gangs you see in movies. They were mostly working guys who loved their bikes and looked out for each other. Danny had joined 3 years ago after his dad died. He needed something, some kind of family to fill the empty space in his chest. The club gave him that, along with a sense of belonging he had never felt before. This particular morning was special. The club was planning their annual ride to London. It was supposed to be a celebration, a chance for all the guys to get together and see the sights. Most of them had never been to the capital city, and the excitement was real. Danny had been looking forward to this trip for months, but as he stood in his small apartment, looking at the pile of unpaid bills on his kitchen table, the excitement felt forced. His girlfriend Katie was sleeping in the next room, her belly round with their first child. The doctor had scheduled another ultrasound appointment for today, right in the middle of the planned ride. Danny stared at the appointment card in his hand. 2 o'clock at the hospital, the same time the club was supposed to be riding through central London. He had promised Katie he would be there. She had been scared lately, worried about the baby, worried about money, worried about everything. This ultrasound was important. The doctor wanted to check something from the last visit. His phone buzzed with a text from Big Mike, the club president. "Ready to roll, brother? London awaits," Danny typed back quickly. "On my way." He looked at the appointment card one more time, then slipped it into his wallet. Maybe he could do both. Maybe he could ride with the club and still make it back in time. London wasn't that far, right? He could figure it out on the road. The meetup spot was an old gas station on the edge of town. When Danny arrived, the rumble of engines filled the air like thunder. 15 bikes were lined up, their chrome gleaming in the sunlight. The guys were already in their element, checking their gear and talking loud over the noise. Big Mike walked over with a huge grin on his face. He was a mountain of a man, with arms like tree trunks and a beard that reached halfway down his chest. Despite his size, Mike was one of the gentlest people Danny had ever met. He ran a small construction company and had 3 kids at home. "There's our boy." Mike slapped Danny on the back hard enough to rattle his teeth. "You ready for this adventure?" Danny nodded, forcing a smile. "Born ready." "Good man. We stick together on this ride, yeah? London traffic is crazy, but we look out for each other like always." The plan was simple. They would ride as a group, take the scenic route through the countryside, and spend the afternoon exploring London. Big Mike had printed out a rough route that would take them past some famous landmarks. Nothing fancy, just a group of friends seeing the city together. As they fired up their engines, Danny felt the familiar thrill run through his body. There was something magical about riding with the club. The way all the bikes moved together, the feeling of power beneath him, the wind rushing past his helmet. For a moment, all his worries faded away. The ride out of Birmingham was perfect. They cruised through small villages and green countryside, the summer air warm against their leather jackets. Danny rode in the middle of the pack, watching the guys ahead of him lean into the curves with practiced ease. These were his brothers, his family. They had been there for him when his dad passed away, and they would be there for him now. But as the miles passed, the appointment card in his wallet felt heavier and heavier. He kept checking his watch, calculating the time. If they kept this pace, he might be cutting it close. Really close. The first sign of trouble came as they hit the outskirts of London. The traffic was insane. Cars everywhere, buses blocking lanes, people walking into the street without looking. The club had to split up just to navigate through the mess. Danny found himself separated from the main group, following just 2 other bikes through streets he didn't recognize. His phone kept buzzing with missed calls from Katie. He couldn't answer while riding, but each buzz made his stomach twist tighter. She was probably at the hospital already, waiting for him, wondering where he was. The GPS on his phone was useless in the city traffic. The signal kept cutting out, and the directions changed every few minutes as the system tried to route around the congestion. Danny was completely lost, following street signs that meant nothing to him, hoping to find his way back to the main group. By the time he realized he was riding alone, it was too late. The other 2 bikes had vanished in the traffic, probably taking a turn he had missed while checking his phone. Now he was just another lost tourist on a motorcycle, stuck in the worst traffic jam he had ever seen. Danny pulled over to check his phone properly. 7 missed calls from Katie, 3 text messages. His hands were shaking as he read them. "Where are you? Appointment is in 30 minutes. Danny, please call me back. I'm scared. The doctor moved our appointment up. I need you here." His heart sank. The appointment had been moved up, and he was stuck in London traffic with no idea how to get out. The hospital was 3 hours away on a good day. Even if he left right now, he would never make it in time. Danny tried calling Katie back, but the call went straight to voicemail. She was probably already in the appointment room, alone and worried. He had promised her he would be there. He had looked her in the eye and promised. The guilt hit him like a punch to the chest. What kind of man chooses a motorcycle ride over his pregnant girlfriend? What kind of father-to-be gets lost playing around with his buddies when his child needs him? He tried calling Big Mike, but the phone just rang and rang. The club was probably dealing with their own traffic problems. Danny was on his own, in a city he didn't know, with no way to get home in time for the most important appointment of his life. The traffic around him wasn't moving at all. Cars sat, bumper to bumper, engines overheating in the summer heat. People were getting out of their vehicles, looking frustrated and angry. Street vendors walked between the cars, selling water bottles and newspapers. The whole city seemed to be at a complete standstill. Danny's motorcycle was getting hot too. The engine was running rough, probably from all the stop-and-go driving. He wasn't used to city riding, and the bike wasn't either. Back home, they rode on open roads where the engine could breathe. This urban crawl was killing both of them. He checked his watch again. The appointment was starting right now. Katie was sitting in that sterile hospital room, answering questions about their baby, while he sat on a motorcycle in the middle of nowhere. The doctor would be looking at the ultrasound screen, checking for whatever had concerned him in the last visit, and Katie would be facing it all alone. Danny felt the anger building in his chest. Anger at himself for making this stupid choice. Anger at the traffic for trapping him here. Anger at the whole situation that had put him in this impossible position. He needed to be in 2 places at once, and he had chosen wrong. The GPS finally locked onto his location. According to the screen, he was somewhere near Buckingham Palace. Great. He was a lost biker sitting in tourist traffic while his pregnant girlfriend dealt with medical concerns alone. The irony wasn't lost on him. He decided to try finding a way out of the traffic jam. Maybe if he could get to a main road, he could at least start heading home. It would still be too late for the appointment, but at least he could be there for Katie afterwards. At least he could apologize and try to make things right. Danny started his engine and began weaving between the stopped cars, looking for any gap that might lead to a clearer street. The traffic was so thick that he had to ride on the sidewalk in some places, drawing angry looks from pedestrians. He didn't care. He just needed to get out of this mess and get home to the woman he loved. But as he turned a corner looking for any escape route, Danny found himself facing something he had never expected to see. There was a crowd of people gathered around what looked like a street performer, and they were completely blocking the road ahead. The performer was dressed in some kind of elaborate red costume, standing perfectly still like a statue. Tourists were taking pictures and dropping coins into a hat on the ground. It was exactly the kind of tourist trap that Danny had no patience for, especially not today. All he could see was another obstacle between him and getting home, another delay when he was already hours late for the most important appointment of his life. The anger that had been building in his chest finally found a target. Danny revved, his engine and started pushing through the crowd, not caring about the dirty looks and complaints from the tourists. He had bigger problems than some street performer's tip jar. Danny pushed his motorcycle through the crowd, his patience completely gone. The tourists were moving too slowly, stopping to take pictures every few steps. Some of them had their phones out, recording videos of the man in the red costume. Others were just standing around talking, completely blocking the narrow street. "Excuse me," Danny called out, revving his engine louder, "coming through." But the crowd barely moved. A few people glanced back at him with annoyed expressions, as if he was the one being unreasonable. One elderly woman actually stepped further into his path, shaking her head like he was some kind of hooligan. Danny felt his blood pressure rising. Every second he sat here was another second Katie was alone at the hospital. He imagined her sitting in that cold examination room, watching the door and hoping he would walk through it. The thought made his chest tight with guilt and frustration. He tried to edge the motorcycle forward more aggressively, using the rumble of the engine to clear a path. Most people moved aside, but they weren't happy about it. He could hear them muttering complaints in different languages. Some were pointing at him and shaking their heads. "Move!" Danny shouted over the noise of his bike. "I need to get through. Here?" That's when he got his first clear look at what everyone was staring at. About 20 feet ahead, standing perfectly still in the middle of the street, was a man in an elaborate red uniform. The guy looked like he was wearing some kind of historical costume, complete with a tall black hat and shiny buttons. He was standing at attention like a soldier, not moving a muscle despite all the chaos around him. Danny's first thought was that this was the most committed street performer he had ever seen. The man didn't even blink as tourists walked circles around him, taking pictures from every angle. A small child had dropped a coin at his feet, but the performer didn't acknowledge it at all. He just stood there like a statue, staring straight ahead. Under normal circumstances, Danny might have been impressed by the guy's dedication to his act. But these weren't normal circumstances. This was the worst day of his life. And this street performer was standing right in the middle of his escape route. Danny tried to ride around the crowd, but there was no room. Cars were parked on both sides of the narrow street, and the sidewalks were packed with more tourists. The only way forward was straight through the middle, and the man in red was blocking that path completely. "Hey!" Danny called out to the performer. "Hey, you in the costume!" The man didn't respond. He didn't even turn his head. He just kept staring straight ahead like Danny didn't exist. This made Danny even more frustrated. He was trying to be polite here, trying to ask nicely for the guy to move aside for just a minute. Danny shut off his engine and climbed off the motorcycle. He could feel dozens of eyes watching him as he walked toward the man in red. The tourists seemed to sense that something was about to happen. Some of them stepped back while others raised their phones higher to get a better view. "Excuse me," Danny said, stopping a few feet away from the performer. "I need to get through here. Can you move aside for just a second?" Still no response. The man continued staring straight ahead as if Danny was invisible. His face was completely expressionless, like a wax figure in a museum. Danny had never seen anyone stand so perfectly still. It was actually kind of creepy. Danny's phone buzzed in his pocket. Another text from Katie. He didn't need to read it to know she was wondering where he was. The appointment was probably over by now. She had probably gone through the whole thing alone, just like he had promised her she wouldn't have to. "Look, mate," Danny said, his voice getting louder. "I'm not trying to mess up your show here, but I really need to get past you. This is important." The performer's eyes didn't even flicker. He might as well have been made of stone. Danny had never encountered anyone so completely unresponsive. It was like the guy was in some kind of trance. The crowd around them was getting bigger. More tourists were stopping to see what was happening. Danny could hear them whispering in different languages, probably wondering what the crazy biker was going to do next. Some of them had their phones out ready to record whatever happened. Danny felt the walls closing in around him. He was trapped in this street, surrounded by strangers, while his girlfriend was going through a medical emergency alone. The guilt and frustration were eating him alive from the inside. "Please," Danny said, trying one more time to be reasonable. "I just need you to step aside for 30 seconds, that's all." Then you can go back to your act. Nothing. The man in red remained frozen in place like a mannequin. Danny was starting to wonder if something was actually wrong with the guy. Maybe he was having some kind of medical episode. Maybe he was stuck in that position and couldn't move. Danny reached out to tap the man on the shoulder, thinking he might need help, but as his hand got close, something stopped him. There was something about the man's posture, something about the way he held himself. That didn't seem like a street performer at all. The uniform was too perfect, too official looking. The fabric was high quality, not the cheap costume material you'd expect from someone working for tips. And those buttons on his jacket weren't plastic. They were real metal, polished to a mirror shine. But Danny was too frustrated to think clearly about any of that. All he could think about was Katie sitting in that hospital room, probably crying, probably thinking he had abandoned her when she needed him most. The image of her face, disappointed and hurt, was burned into his mind. "Fine," Danny said, his voice getting hard. "If you won't move, I'll make you move." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Attached to it was a heavy chain, the kind bikers use to keep their wallet secure when riding. Danny had bought it years ago after someone tried to pickpocket him at a gas station. The chain was thick and solid, designed to withstand any attempt at theft. Danny wrapped the chain around his hand, letting the wallet dangle at the end like a weight. It wasn't meant to be a weapon, he just wanted to get the performer's attention, maybe scare him into moving aside. He had no intention of actually hitting anyone. "I'm warning you," Danny said, raising his voice so the crowd could hear. "Get out of my way or I'm going to move you myself." The man in red didn't flinch. If anything, he seemed to stand even straighter, his jaw set in a firm line. For the first time, Danny thought he saw something in the man's eyes. Not fear, but determination, like he was ready for whatever was about to happen. Danny started swinging the chain in a slow circle, hoping the motion would finally get through to the stubborn performer. The metal links made a soft whistling sound as they cut through the air. The crowd around them went completely silent, everyone holding their breath. "Last chance," Danny said, stepping closer. "Move or I'll move you." The man in red didn't budge. He stood there like a rock, completely unmoved by Danny's threats. It was like he had been trained to ignore distractions, no matter how aggressive they became. That's when Danny lost it completely. All the stress and guilt and frustration of the day came pouring out at once. He wasn't thinking about consequences anymore. He wasn't thinking about right and wrong. He was just a desperate man who needed to get home to his pregnant girlfriend, and this stubborn street performer was standing in his way. Danny swung the chain harder, bringing it closer to the man's face. The wallet at the end barely missed, the man's nose by an inch or two. The crowd gasped and stepped back further. Several people screamed. Phones were everywhere now, recording every second of what was happening. "Move!" Danny shouted, swinging the chain again. "Get out of my way!" But the man in red just stood there, taking it all without moving a muscle. His eyes never left their forward position. His face never changed expression. He absorbed Danny's rage like a stone wall absorbing waves. Danny was so focused on the man in front of him that he didn't notice what was happening around them. He didn't see the tourists backing away in fear. He didn't see the phones recording his every move. He didn't see the security cameras mounted on the nearby buildings. Most importantly, he didn't see the signs posted around the area. Signs that clearly identified where he was. Signs that explained who the man in red really was. Signs that would have stopped Danny cold if he had bothered to read them. Danny swung the chain one more time, closer than ever to the man's face. This time, the wallet actually brushed against the red fabric of his uniform. The man didn't even blink. "What is wrong with you?" Danny screamed, completely losing control. "Why won't you just move?" The crowd was in chaos now. People were shouting in different languages, some trying to calm Danny down, others calling for help. Children were crying. Parents were pulling their kids away from the scene. And through it all, the man in red stood perfectly still, like a lighthouse in a storm. He wasn't a street performer putting on an act. He was something else entirely, something Danny was too angry and desperate to recognize. It would be several more minutes before Danny realized the horrible truth about what he had just done. Several more minutes before he understood that every second of his breakdown had been captured on dozens of phones and security cameras. Several more minutes before he learned that he hadn't been threatening a street performer at all. The man in the red uniform was one of the Queen's guards, and Danny— the first sign that Danny had made a terrible mistake came in the form of running footsteps, heavy boots pounding on pavement, getting closer fast. He was still standing there with the chain in his hand, still trying to figure out why the man in red wouldn't move when he heard someone shouting behind him, "Armed police, get on the ground, now!" Danny spun around and felt his blood turn to ice. 3 officers in tactical gear were running straight toward him, their weapons drawn. Their faces were hidden behind helmets and visors, but their intent was crystal clear. This wasn't a request. It was a command. Get on the ground. Drop the weapon. Weapon? Danny looked down at the chain in his hand, confused. It was just his wallet chain, the same one he carried every day. How was that a weapon? And why were there armed police here? He had just been trying to get past a street performer. "I don't understand," Danny started to say, but his words were cut off as 2 officers tackled him from behind. Danny hit the pavement, hard, his knees scraping against the rough concrete. His leather jacket protected most of him from the fall, but his hands were pinned behind his back before he could even think about getting up. The chain fell from his grip, clattering across the street. "You have the right to remain silent," one of the officers said, snapping handcuffs around Danny's wrists. "Anything you say may be used against you in court." Danny's mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. The crowd of tourists had backed away even further, but they were all still watching. All those phones were still pointing at him, recording every second of his humiliation. "Wait," Danny said, struggling against the handcuffs. "There's been some kind of mistake. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just trying to get past that guy." One of the officers hauled him to his feet. For the first time, Danny got a clear look at where he was. Really looked at it. The ornate gates, the perfectly manicured grounds, the official-looking guards posted at regular intervals. This wasn't just some random street in London. This was Buckingham Palace. The realization hit him like a punch to the stomach. The man in red wasn't a street performer at all. He was one of the Queen's guards, one of the most respected and recognized symbols of British tradition. And Danny had just threatened him with a chain in front of hundreds of witnesses. "Oh no," Danny whispered, the full weight of his actions finally sinking in. "Oh no, no, no. Danny Coleman," the officer said, reading from a card. "You are under arrest for threatening behavior, assault, and causing a public disturbance in the vicinity of a royal residence." Danny's legs almost gave out beneath him. Royal residence. He had assaulted a Queen's guard at Buckingham Palace, the most famous address in England, maybe in the world. And it had all been caught on camera. The crowd was still growing as word spread about what had happened. Danny could hear people talking in hushed, excited voices. Some were already on their phones, probably posting videos to social media. Others were trying to get closer to see the notorious biker who had attacked the Queen's guard. As the police led him toward their van, Danny caught a glimpse of the guard he had threatened. The man was still standing in exactly the same position as if nothing had happened at all. His face showed no emotion, no anger, no satisfaction at seeing Danny arrested. He was simply doing his job, the same job he had been doing when Danny arrived. The van ride to the police station was a blur of shame and panic. Danny kept trying to explain to the officers that it had all been a misunderstanding, that he had thought the guard was a street performer. But even as he said it, he knew how ridiculous it sounded. How could anyone mistake one of the Queen's guards for a street performer? At the station, things got worse, much worse. As Danny was being processed, he could see police officers gathered around computer screens watching something intently. One of them noticed him looking and turned the screen so he could see. It was a video of him swinging the chain at the guard. Someone had already uploaded it to social media, and the views were climbing fast. Thousands of people had already seen it, and the numbers were growing by the minute. "You're famous," the officer said with a grim smile. "This is going viral." Danny watched in horror as his worst moment played out on the screen over and over again. In the video, he looked exactly like what everyone would assume he was, a violent thug attacking an innocent guard. There was no context, no explanation of his desperation to get home to Katie. Just an angry biker swinging a chain at one of Britain's most beloved symbols. The comments below the video were brutal. People were calling him every name in the book. Some were making jokes about American tourists even though Danny was British. Others were demanding that he be locked up and the key thrown away. A few were even making threats about what they would do to him if they ever met him in person. Danny's phone had been confiscated during his arrest, but he could imagine the calls and texts that were probably piling up. Katie would have seen the news by now. His mother would have seen it. Big Mike and the rest of the Iron Wolves would have seen it. Everyone he had ever known would know exactly what kind of person he really was. The questioning went on for hours. Danny told the whole story. About the ride to London, about getting lost in traffic, about missing Katie's appointment. But he could see in the officer's eyes that none of it mattered. Intent didn't matter when you threatened a Queen's Guard. On camera. "Do you understand the seriousness of what you've done?" the detective asked. "The Queen's Guards are symbols of our nation. They represent centuries of tradition and service. What you did today was an attack on everything they stand for." Danny nodded miserably. He understood now, but understanding didn't change anything. The damage was done. The video was out there, spreading across the internet like wildfire. His face was associated with those few horrible minutes for the rest of his life. When they finally allowed him to make a phone call, Danny's hands were shaking so badly he could barely dial Katie's number. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, and when she did, her voice was cold as ice. "Katie," Danny said, relief flooding through him just to hear her voice. "Thank God. Are you okay? How did the appointment go? Is the baby—" "Don't," Katie cut him off. "Just don't." Danny felt his heart sink. "Katie, please let me explain. I got lost in traffic and then— I saw the video, Danny. Everyone saw the video. My mother called me. My sister called me. People I haven't talked to in years are calling me. Do you have any idea what this is like for me?" Danny closed his eyes, trying to fight back the tears that were threatening to come. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just trying to get home to you." "By attacking a Queen's Guard?" Katie's voice was getting higher, more emotional. "By making yourself look like some kind of violent criminal on national television? How is that trying to get home to me?" "It wasn't like that," Danny protested weakly. "I thought he was a street performer. I didn't know where I was. I was just so desperate to get to you." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Katie spoke again, her voice was quiet but firm. "The appointment went fine," she said. "The baby is healthy. But you weren't there, Danny. When I needed you most, you weren't there. And now this whole mess is going to follow us for the rest of our lives." "Katie, please." "I need some time to think," she said. "I can't deal with this right now. I can't deal with you right now." The line went dead. Danny stared at the phone in disbelief, then slowly hung up. The officer who had been watching gave him a sympathetic look. "Rough day," the man said quietly. Danny was released on bail 12 hours later, but the nightmare was just beginning. As he walked out of the police station, he was met by a crowd of reporters and photographers. Camera flashes went off like lightning as they shouted questions at him. "Danny, why did you attack the guard? Are you a member of a violent motorcycle gang? What do you have to say to the people calling for your imprisonment?" Danny tried to push through the crowd without answering, but they followed him down the street. Every step was recorded, every expression analyzed. He felt like an animal in a zoo, put on display for the entertainment of the public. When he finally made it back to Birmingham, things only got worse. His apartment building was surrounded by more reporters. His neighbors were giving interviews about what kind of person he was. His boss at the garage had already left 3 voicemails firing him and telling him never to come back. The Iron Wolves wanted nothing to do with him either. Big Mike called him personally to deliver the news. "I'm sorry, brother," Mike said, and he sounded like he really meant it. "But we can't have this kind of heat on the club, you understand, right? We got families to think about. Danny understood. The club had a reputation to protect, and being associated with someone who attacked the Queen's Guard wasn't good for anyone. In the span of 24 hours, he had lost his job, his club, and possibly his family. The media circus continued, for days. The video had been viewed millions of times across different platforms. News stations were running it on repeat, usually followed by discussions about violence, respect for tradition, and the decline of society. Danny's face was everywhere, always frozen in that moment of rage as he swung the chain. 3 months after the incident, Danny was sitting in his lawyer's cramped office staring at a pile of legal documents that might as well have been written in a foreign language. The walls were covered with law books and certificates, but none of it made Danny feel any better about his situation. If anything, the formal setting just reminded him how serious his troubles really were. His lawyer, Mr. Thompson, was a decent man who had been assigned to Danny's case through legal aid. He wasn't flashy or expensive, but he was honest about Danny's chances, which weren't good at all. The prosecution is pushing hard for a custodial sentence, Thompson explained, adjusting his glasses as he read through the paperwork. Given the high-profile nature of the case and the public sentiment, they want to make an example of you. Danny nodded numbly. He had heard this same speech several times over the past few months. The message was always the same. He was probably going to prison and there wasn't much anyone could do about it. How long are we talking about? Danny asked, though he wasn't sure he really wanted to know the answer. 18 months to 2 years, most likely. Maybe longer if the judge decides to treat it as a more serious offense against the Crown. 2 years. Danny tried to imagine spending 2 years in a cell, missing the birth of his child, watching his life fall apart from behind bars. Katie had already made it clear that she was moving on without him. The baby would be born, take their first steps and speak their first words while Danny was locked away. There is one thing, though, Thompson said, looking puzzled as he shuffled through some papers. Something unexpected has come up. Danny looked up with mild interest. After months of bad news, he had almost forgotten what it felt like to hope for something good. What kind of something? Thompson pulled out a formal-looking document with an official seal at the top. We've received a statement from the victim. From the guard, from the guard. Danny felt his stomach drop. A victim impact statement would probably make things even worse. The guard would talk about how the incident had affected him, how it had made him feel unsafe doing his job. It would be another nail in Danny's coffin. Let me guess, Danny said bitterly. He wants them to throw the book at me. Thompson shook his head, looking genuinely confused. Actually, no. That's what's so strange about this. He's asking for leniency. Danny blinked. What? His name is James Mitchell. He's a sergeant in the Queen's Guard, been serving for 12 years. And according to this statement, he doesn't want you to go to prison. Thompson handed Danny the document. It was written in formal military language, but the message was clear. Sergeant Mitchell was requesting that the court consider alternative sentencing for Danny's case. He was vouching for Danny's character and asking for mercy. Danny read the statement 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. Why would he do this? I attacked him. I threatened him in front of hundreds of people. That's what I'd like to know, Thompson said. And apparently he'd like to tell you himself. He's requested a meeting. Danny's hands were shaking as he set the document down. He wants to meet with me? Today, if you're willing. He's waiting in the conference room down the hall. Danny felt like the world had suddenly tilted sideways. Nothing about this made sense. Why would the man he had wronged want to help him? Why would a Queen's Guard care what happened to some stupid biker who had made the worst mistake of his life? I don't understand, Danny said. Is this some kind of trick? Is he going to try to get me to confess to something worse? Thompson shrugged. I don't think so. His statement seems genuine and he came here on his own time. But you don't have to meet with him if you don't want to. It's entirely up to you. Danny sat in silence for a long moment, trying to process this unexpected development. Part of him was terrified to face the man he had wronged. What would he say? How could he possibly apologize for what he had done? but another part of him desperately wanted to understand why this was happening. "Okay," Danny said finally. "I'll meet with him." Thompson led Danny down a narrow hallway to a small conference room. Through the glass door, Danny could see a man, in civilian clothes, sitting at a table. He was tall and lean, with short brown hair and the kind of posture that screamed military training. Even in regular clothes, he looked like a soldier. "Take your time," Thompson said, opening the door. "I'll be in my office when you're done." Danny stepped into the room, and Sergeant Mitchell stood up immediately. He was younger than Danny had expected, maybe in his early 30s. His handshake was firm but not aggressive, and his eyes were calm and steady. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Mitchell said in a crisp accent that marked him as career military. "Please sit down." Danny took a seat across from the man he had threatened with a chain just 3 months ago. Up close, Mitchell looked completely different from that day. Without the elaborate red uniform and tall hat, he was just a regular person. A person that Danny had terrorized for no good reason. "I owe you an apology," Danny started, but Mitchell held up a hand to stop him. "Before you say anything," Mitchell said, "I want you to know why I asked to meet with you." Danny nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "I've been a Queen's Guard for 12 years, Mitchell began. "I've stood in that same spot thousands of times. I've dealt with drunk tourists, protesters, people trying to get a reaction out of me. It's part of the job. But what happened with you was different." "Different how?" Danny asked quietly. Mitchell leaned forward slightly. "Because you weren't trying to get a reaction. You weren't doing it for fun or to impress your friends. You were desperate." Danny felt his throat tighten. "That's no excuse for what I did." "No, it's not," Mitchell agreed. "But it's an explanation. And sometimes understanding why something happened is more important than just punishing it." Mitchell reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. "After the incident, I started thinking about what I had seen that day. Your behavior, your body language, the way you kept checking your phone. You weren't acting like someone who wanted to cause trouble. You were acting like someone in crisis." Danny watched as Mitchell opened the folder and pulled out several printed pages. They looked like they had been printed from a computer screen. "So I did some research," Mitchell continued. "I looked into your background, your situation, what was happening in your life that day." Danny felt a chill run down his spine. "You investigated me?" "Not officially. Just curiosity, really. And what I found was interesting." Mitchell spread the papers out on the table. "You're not a career criminal. You've never been arrested before. You work hard, you pay your taxes, you take care of your family. The motorcycle club you belong to does charity rides for veterans." Danny stared at the papers, recognizing some of them as newspaper clippings about club events. There was a photo of him and the other Iron Wolves delivering Christmas presents to a children's hospital. Another showed them raising money for a veteran who had lost his leg in Afghanistan. "Your girlfriend was pregnant," Mitchell continued. "You had a medical appointment that day that you were desperate to get to. You got lost in London traffic and panicked. None of that excuses what you did, but it explains it." "Why does any of this matter to you?" Danny asked, genuinely confused. "I mean, I appreciate that you're trying to understand, but I still attacked you. I still made you look bad in front of all those people." Mitchell smiled slightly. "You didn't make me look bad. If anything, you proved that I'm good at my job. I stood my ground under pressure, which is exactly what I'm trained to do." Danny shook his head. "I don't understand why you're helping me." "Because I've been where you are," Mitchell said simply. "Not exactly the same situation, but I've been desperate and scared and made decisions I regretted later." Mitchell paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I served 3 tours in Afghanistan. I saw things there, did things there, that I'm not proud of. Combat changes you. It teaches you that sometimes good people do bad things when they're pushed to their limit." Danny felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't what he had expected at all. "When I came back from my last deployment," Mitchell continued, "I was angry all the time. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't connect with people. I got into fights, said terrible things to people I loved. I was lucky that I had officers who saw past my behavior to the person underneath. What happened? Danny asked. They got me help. Therapy, counseling, support from other veterans who had been through the same thing. They could have thrown me out of the service, and I would have deserved it. Instead, they gave me a second chance. Mitchell gathered up the papers and put them back in the folder. I'm not saying what you did was right, but I am saying that one bad decision doesn't define who you are as a person. You were having the worst day of your life and you made a mistake. A big mistake, but still just a mistake. Danny felt tears starting to form in his eyes. For months, everyone had been treating him like a monster, like someone who was fundamentally different from normal people. But Mitchell was seeing him as a human being who had screwed up. Your statement, Danny said, his voice thick with emotion. You really think I shouldn't go to prison? I think prison would be a waste, Mitchell said firmly. You're not a danger to society. You're not going to make this mistake again. Locking you up. 6 months after meeting Sergeant Mitchell, Danny stood in front of a courtroom packed with reporters, photographers, and curious onlookers. His hands were sweating as he waited for the judge to announce his sentence. The past few months had been a whirlwind of community service, counseling sessions, and trying to rebuild his shattered life. True to his word, Sergeant Mitchell had submitted his recommendation to the court. But more than that, he had become something Danny never expected, a mentor and friend. The two men had met regularly over the months, and Mitchell had helped guide Danny through the process of understanding his anger and finding better ways to deal with stress. The defendant will rise, the judge said, her voice echoing through the crowded courtroom. Danny stood on shaky legs, his lawyer beside him. In the gallery behind him he could see his mother, who had flown in from Scotland for the hearing. Katie was there too, sitting with her parents. She had started talking to him again after he began the counseling program, though their relationship was still fragile. Mr. Coleman, the judge began, what you did that day was serious. You threatened a serving member of Her Majesty's forces in the course of his duty. Such actions cannot and will not be tolerated. Danny's heart sank. This sounded like the beginning of a prison sentence. However, the judge continued, this court has received an extraordinary character reference from Sergeant Mitchell, the very man you wronged. His testimony about your character and potential for rehabilitation has been noted, Danny dared to hope. Furthermore, your completion of anger management counseling, your extensive community service work, and your previously clean record have all been taken into consideration. This court sentences you to 2 years of supervised community service, continued counseling, and a substantial fine. Danny felt his knees almost give out with relief. No prison. He would be able to watch his child grow up. The crowd behind him erupted in a mixture of cheers and boos. Some people thought the sentence was too lenient. Others believed justice had been served. As Danny left the courthouse that day, a small group of reporters surrounded him. For the first time since the incident, he stopped to answer their questions. Do you have anything to say to Sergeant Mitchell? One reporter asked. Danny looked directly into the camera. He saved my life, not just legally, but personally. He showed me that one mistake doesn't have to define who you are. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to prove that his faith in me was justified. The real work began after the trial ended. Danny threw himself into his community service with an intensity that surprised everyone, including himself. He was assigned to work with a veterans motorcycle restoration program, helping disabled servicemen rebuild old bikes that had been donated to the charity. The work was perfect for Danny. He got to use his mechanical skills while also giving back to people who had served their country. Many of the veterans he worked with had their own stories of struggle and redemption. They understood what it was like to make mistakes and fight to overcome them. One of the veterans was a man named Tom, who had lost both legs in an explosion in Iraq. Tom had fallen into depression and alcoholism after returning home, but working on motorcycles had helped him find purpose again. He became something of a mentor to Danny, teaching him that healing was a process, not a destination. The thing about rock bottom, Tom told Danny one day as they worked on restoring a vintage Triumph, is that it gives you a solid foundation to build on. You can't fall any further, so the only way to go is up. Danny's relationship with Katie slowly began to heal as well. She saw the changes in him, the way he handled stress differently, the way he talked about his feelings instead of bottling them up. When their daughter was born, Danny was there in the delivery room, holding Katie's hand and crying tears of joy and relief. They named the baby Hope, which seemed fitting given everything they had been through. But the most unbelievable part of Danny's redemption was still to come. About a year after his sentencing, Sergeant Mitchell reached out with an unexpected proposition. "I'm retiring from the Guard next month," Mitchell told Danny over coffee. They had been meeting regularly, and their relationship had evolved from mentor-student to genuine friendship. "I've been thinking about what to do next." "Any ideas?" Danny asked. Mitchell smiled. "Actually, yes. I've been watching what you're doing with the Veterans Motorcycle Program. It's impressive work. Really impressive." Danny felt a flush of pride. The program had grown significantly since he started working there. They were restoring more bikes than ever before, and the waiting list of veterans wanting to participate kept getting longer. "I've been thinking," Mitchell continued, "what if we started our own program? Something bigger, something that could help even more people." Danny nearly choked on his coffee. "We? I've got my military pension and some savings. You've got the mechanical expertise and the passion for the work. We could make a real difference together." Danny stared at his friend in amazement. "You want to go into business with me? The guy who attacked you with a chain?" Mitchell laughed. "Especially that guy. Because you understand what it's like to hit bottom and fight your way back up. That's exactly the kind of person these veterans need to work with." And so 6 months later, Second Chance Cycles opened its doors in a converted warehouse in Birmingham. The business model was simple. They would take donated motorcycles, restore them with the help of veterans and ex-offenders, and then either sell them to fund the program or give them to veterans who needed transportation. The opening day was covered by the same news outlets that had crucified Danny 2 years earlier. But this time, the story was about redemption, second chances, and the power of forgiveness. The video of Danny threatening the Guard was still played, but now it was followed by footage of him and Mitchell working side by side, helping other people overcome their own struggles. Katie was there for the opening, along with baby Hope. Danny's mother had flown down from Scotland again, this time for a celebration instead of a court hearing. Even some of the Iron Wolves showed up, including Big Mike, who had slowly begun to accept Danny back into the fold. "I'm proud of you, brother," Mike told Danny as they watched Mitchell give a speech to the gathered crowd. "You turned the worst thing that ever happened to you into something beautiful." The business grew steadily over the following months. Veterans from across the country came to participate in the program. Some came to learn new skills. Others came to find community and purpose. Many came because they were struggling with their own demons and needed to see that redemption was possible. Danny found himself sharing his story more and more often. At first, it was difficult to talk about that day at Buckingham Palace, but he learned that his experience could help other people who were facing their own dark moments. "The chain I swung that day wasn't just a piece of metal," Danny would tell groups of veterans and ex-offenders. "It was all my anger, my fear, my desperation. I thought destroying something would make me feel better, but it only made things worse." Real strength isn't about lashing out when you're hurt. It's about asking for help, accepting responsibility, and doing the work to become better. The most powerful moment came during the program's first anniversary celebration. Danny was giving a speech about second chances when he saw a familiar figure in the back of the crowd. It was the same elderly woman who had been in the crowd that day at Buckingham Palace, the one who had stepped into his path when he was trying to get through on his motorcycle. After his speech, she approached him with tears in her eyes. "I was there that day," she said simply. "I saw what you did, but I also saw the look in your eyes. You weren't evil, you were just lost." Danny felt his own eyes filling with tears. "I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm sorry I scared you." She shook her head. "Don't apologize to me. Celebrate how far you've come. You've turned something terrible into something wonderful." 3 years after the incident, Danny and Mitchell's business had helped over 200 veterans and ex-offenders learn new skills and find new purpose. The program had been featured in documentaries, copied by other organizations, and held up as a model for rehabilitation and community healing. Danny and Katie had gotten married in a small ceremony at the workshop, surrounded by the motorcycles they had restored and the people whose lives had been changed by the program. Hope took her first steps in that same workshop, toddling between the workbenches while veterans and ex-offenders cheered her on. The viral video that had once destroyed Danny's life was now part of his testimony. He would show it to people he was trying to help, not to shame himself, but to demonstrate that no mistake is too big to overcome with the right support and determination. That angry man swinging a chain, Danny would say. That was me at my absolute worst. But it wasn't the real me. The real me is who you see today, someone who learned from his mistakes, accepted help when it was offered, and dedicated his life to helping others do the same. The most unbelievable part of the whole story wasn't that Danny had threatened a Queen's Guard. It wasn't even that the guard had forgiven him and helped him avoid prison. The most unbelievable part was that the worst day of Danny's life had ultimately led to the best thing he had ever done.